Welcome to Sports from the Couch.
I gotta say, it's the stupidest thing in sports.
With your host, Mike Mercado.
Players cannot stand him. Coaches cannot stand him. Most importantly, the fans can't stand him.
Brought to you by Mercado Airwaves.
I'm gonna say it once, and hopefully I'm wrong, but it's a disaster waiting to happen.
That is so bad, that is absolutely brutal.
Hello and welcome in, friends, to another edition of Sports from the Couch here on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. I want to thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Hopefully you guys are enjoying a wonderful weekend wherever you're watching us, and of course here in the best city in the world, Chicago, IL. On today's edition of Sports from the Couch, the Chicago Bulls have finally moved on from Lauri Markkanen. He has a brand new home, and the Bulls have some draft capital and a brand new player. We're going to get to all that and so much more. But before we do, let's take care of some housekeeping notes. You can follow us all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at MikeMedia, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and you can be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Like, rate, review, and shares wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. We're on all major podcast platforms. Check out the video version of the podcast over at ROKU at The Rewind Sports 60. Shout out to Jerry Riles and the team over there. Roku.com/The Rewind Sports 60. And of course on YouTube, YouTube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. Make sure you guys hit that little bell and subscribe to us to be notified every single time we upload a brand new episode of Sports from the Couch and all our other shows on the network. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Check us out at teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves for some swag. Become a producer of the network. Buy us a cup of coffee. Show us a little love if you can, if you could afford it. If it's in the means, trust us. Either way, we love you. But if you can, at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And keep up to date with all the shows being uploaded from the Good Brothers, the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast, Murder Mysteries and More, the Gone Missing podcast, of course, Sports from the Couch, and all our interviews with athletes and celebrities on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. So that's right. On Friday, it came down that Lauri Markkanen has had a sign and trade. It's a 3-team deal between the Portland Trail Blazers, the Chicago Bulls, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So to kind of just keep it nice and tight, I went to, of course, our friends over at NBC Sports Chicago, and the one and only Rob Schaefer had a nice article. You guys need to check it out if you're a Bulls fan at NBC Sports Chicago. It is Bulls Make Out Like Bandits in Markkanen Sign and Trade by Rob Schaefer at NBC Sports Chicago. Make sure you guys are checking out the podcast as well. Friend of the show, Tony Gill, is always causing trouble there. So they talked about all this and much more. But Rob did a great job of kind of just keeping it nice and tight. So let's get into it and let's react. Let's see how we feel about this, because we've all known as this trade has finally gone down and this era is over and the Chicago Bulls, this huge turnaround, essentially only 2 players left from the old regime. Markkanen, in so many ways, is the best and worst of the NBA. And I don't mean this to be hyperbolic or, some kind of hot take. What I mean by that is Lauri's a baller. Lauri can go off. Lauri is the unicorn. Everybody always talks about Kristaps Porzingis and Luka and all these other dudes, right? In people's dream world, that is what Lauri Markkanen is. That he is one of these, big European-esque type players that back in the old mid-2000 days, we would all just be, emerged in and we would just be in love with. But the NBA is such a unique game now where everybody's this unicorn. And we'll talk about kind of unicorns where you look at somebody like a Derrick Jones Jr. who's 6'5", but he's got the wingspan of a 7-footer. All these dudes are athletic. All these dudes can shoot. So for Lauri, when he was drafted, it was right before everybody really got clued in on what type of player you need to go for, the athleticism. The specialty player is nice, but you don't necessarily build your team around them. You have a big guy that can do multiple things. So the pros of Lauri Markkanen is he does have the template. If you're creating a basketball player, he is somebody you would love to see develop, and he could be special. He is somebody that should use his body, should be able to put up 20-something points, get double-digit rebounds, be a menace for people who are trying to drive down the lane. Is he that? Depends on the game. And that goes into his negatives. He's never fully developed into what he should be. And of course, that's easy for somebody who's 5'11", right? Like, the 7-footer should be doing this. But in the League of Giants, when the difference is this much between you being a good basketball player in the NBA to a great player, to an all-star, to a superstar, Those are the little things. Not being able to be pushed around, being decisive. I don't think it helped that he's had a lot of weird development from the coaching staff and the front office that he had before. But I think he got a fair shake with AK and Emmy. I think he got a fair shake when it came to this current front office. And it didn't work out. And it's something we've been saying for months here on Sports from the Couch. We've been talking about it that when Zach went out and they were in that final run, and we seen that Kobe White was trying to do what he can to do his part. And then you have Lauri Markkanen, where an opportunity like that came to him. It was his chance on a contract year. The superstar is gone. You're trying to make a playoff push. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And I also think it might be a case where a new scenario might be good for him. But let's get into the details of this. Again, this is from Rob Schaefer over at NBC Sports Chicago. Check out the latest article. Bulls make out like bandits in market and sign and trade. The Bulls receive Derrick Jones Jr., a 2022 first-round pick via Portland, which is lottery protected, by the way, 2023 second-round pick from Cleveland via Denver. According to ESPN Adrian Wojnarowski, the pick is lottery protected between 1 and 14 through 2028. If not conveyed by then, it becomes a second-round pick. The Cavaliers receive Lauri Markkanen, and the Trailblazers receive Larry Nance Jr. So let's get into a little bit of the analysis, and again, from Rob Schaefer and a lot of the experts in the league. At a glance, this is a fine bit of business for the Bulls. It's been long apparent that breakup was in both Markkanen and the team's best interests. Instead of losing the still promising 24-year-old for nothing, which looked like a very plausible outcome at the outset of this offseason, the Bulls accomplished a couple different things through this transaction. For one, they recoup a not insignificant amount of draft capital in a time of need. And it's something where, as we continue on with this article, that as much as, if you've listened to past episodes, I've said draft capital is only as good or as bad as your team is. But, and this isn't about necessarily the Bulls, when you're gaining assets, right, you're not necessarily looking at the draft. You're looking at what can that draft prospect, what can that draft being intriguing for another GM to get a superstar. For example, people keep saying they need a big man. What if Karl Anthony Towns was available, right? Just throwing a name out there. You want to have as much assets. And for a team like Minnesota, don't matter the draft pick. As many draft picks as possible to get as many kids as possible is what they like. That's alluring to a team like that. That's why it's a big deal. Regardless if you ever pick anybody in that from those Portland or Cleveland picks, it's all just to add more chips to the table. Let's continue on with Rob's article here. For one, they recoup a not insignificant amount of draft capital in a time of need. Between the Nikola Vucevic deal, which cost them top 4 protected first rounders in 2021 and 2023, and the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade, which saw them part with a 2025 first rounder, the Bulls before Friday were out 3 first round picks, 2 future, and unable to trade any of the ones they do own because of the stipend rule, which of course means you can't, here we go, he actually reads it, which forbids trading future first rounds in back-to-back years. So that's the only reason, unlike the NFL where you can trade as many as you want, the NBA, you can't do that. They were also awaiting the results of tampering investigation into their acquisition of Lonzo Ball, which could cost them an additional draft capital if found guilty. Which, by the way, it seems like we haven't really heard a lot about that. So I wonder how serious or how heavy the league is going to come down on them. Because there have been many reports as, the weeks have gone on that the league does want to make examples of people. And the league was very upset, even though they make it illegal tampering, which how is that possible? But there goes a big corporation. The league sometimes, as great as the NBA is, can be a big dummy sometimes. A lottery-protected first round from Portland is no crown jewel, as we talked about. But unless a Damian Lillard trade materializes by this season's trade deadline, that selection is likely to convey this year, giving the Bulls either an extra bite at the apple in the mid to late first round in 2022, a bit of ammo to utilize on the trade market next offseason, or insurance against the potential loss of draft capital in the future. The 2023 second round pick is a nice dollop of gravy, given they also parted with 2 future seconds in the DeRozan deal. So there you go. So it's still out there that the league still might come down on the Cubs, on the Bulls. For the league should come down on the Cubs. Comes down on the Bulls and take away draft picks. But it is interesting the way that Portland thing going on impacts the Bulls now, right? Like, I think for most Bulls fans, they thought if Portland was ever going to be in conversations or worrisome or impact the Bulls' future in any way, it would be they're trading Dame to Chicago or Zach LaVine to Portland. Now it's how bad can they be, or are they going to send Dame to New York or something, and how is that going to impact now a Bulls pick? So it also seems like they might be using it this coming up year. Let's continue on with this article. Again, check it out at NBC Sports Chicago from Rob Schaefer. Thank you guys for joining us here on Sports from the Couch on Mercado Airwaves. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Lauri Markkanen has been traded from the Chicago Bulls, and we have a new regime doing some big things in Chicago over the last few years. The Bulls also address an area of roster weakness with the acquisition of Jones Jr., who signed with the Trailblazers for the full mid-level last offseason but failed to meet expectations. Jones Jr. is by no means a transformational player. There's a reason it didn't work out in Portland, but that he's unnaturally long at 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan, and athletic, a springing combo forward that can, at the very least, run the floor hard, slam home lobs, and generate deflections in a marginal row, which is crazy to think that Zach LaVine might not be the best dunker on the team now. And now with this is where you got to start thinking about the roster, right? Lonzo Ball, somebody who likes to push the ball, likes to facilitate the ball, likes to get plays going. Zach LaVine has never had a point guard like that. You have now with Jones going to be able to kind of run the floor too. This is a guy that's only averaged like 6 points in his NBA career, so don't expect him to be going off like crazy. But the idea of that type of athleticism, that type of danger going to the rim is something really interesting. With Patrick Williams, we'll see what happens if this team really starts becoming this go at the rim, go at that defense, and try to make plays. Fascinated to see what they've done here. And we continue on. He slots in tidily at a backup power forward for the time being, joining Patrick Williams and DeRozan as the only players on the roster with even limited NBA experience at that position. It's going to be interesting to see, too, with DeRozan, who's somebody like who likes a mid-range game, how that's going to help him, too. You got people who are constantly going to the rim, that athleticism, and just crashing on offense and defense, and how that opens up the game for DeRozan. DeRozan's going to eat. Remember, too, that the Bulls were linked to Jones Jr. last offseason. They once saw something in him. They probably believe there is still yet potential to unlock within the 24-year-old. That's crazy. He's been in the league so long and he's 24 years old. At a position of need, his athleticism and defensive versatility should give him a chance to contribute on the wing or in the front court, both areas in which the Bulls are thin. And with just 1 year remaining on his contract at $9.7 million, he offers little downside, even given his woeful track record as a jump shooter. So cost efficient. You know, I'm not somebody who ever gets in somebody's pockets. Like, I don't believe in that, especially talking about sports or things like that. Any type of job, like, no. But when you do know their contract that is this team friendly, and you're able to move on, you're able to get money off the books, it all just starts adding up to flexibility and still making your team attractive right now. And as a final point, let's be real. Markkanen playing this season out in Chicago on the qualifying offer wasn't going to make anyone happy. This deal provides Markkanen a pretty hefty payday, considering the dearth of cap space on the market and long-term security in a fresh situation, while the Bulls get themselves a handsome return. Once again, shout out to Rob Schaefer from NBC Sports Chicago. Check out the article, the entire article over at Bulls Make Out Like Bandits in the Markkanen sign and trade. He really breaks down the entire trade and what it means for the Bulls' future. But I wanted to talk about this in detail because it kind of just broke down the overall story of how this arc happened. So I'm happy for Lauri. I think Lauri is a nice player, a contributor. I wanted to see him go to Phoenix, San Antonio, somewhere where they could really exploit his attributes and what he's good at and try to just tell him, like, this is what you're good at. Go do this for us. Cleveland, obviously, the stuff going on with Kevin Love, it's a good place for him to kind of just get playing time. I always like Larry Nance. Like, I think he's underrated. Like, I don't know how great he is or anything, but makes things a little interesting for Dame. Changes things up for Dame. So shout out to all the Portland Trailblazer fans. We'll see how that works out for them. But for the Bulls, it's just more bodies, different type of basketball player. It's also, this is where I tweeted this out to a friend of the show, Tony Gill. And speaking of Rob Schaefer, Tony Gill, Casey Johnson, Jason Goff, check out the Bulls Talk podcast over at NBC Sports. They do a wonderful job here locally talking about the team in the west side of Chicago. But, I think when you're really thinking about the way the Chicago Bulls made out with this trade and what it means, and like I said, I tweeted this out to Tony Gill, was that they were creative. This is something that they had to work on. They had to get another team involved. They had to talk to teams that they don't really make trades with. They have to talk to GMs that you normally don't hear in Chicago media. They had to be likable. Other teams had to want to work with them. NBA players who, the league likes, some of these players they're really intertwined with all the cliques among the NBA. All the cool kids in the NBA. You got to read in between the lines for this. Does it mean you're going to win an NBA championship this year or next year? No, absolutely not. What it means, though, is you're part of the conversation. You're at the big boys table. People want to talk to you. You don't stink. You're not the kid in the playground that stinks anymore. And that means something. Because for the longest time in the NBA, that's what they were. They were a team that nobody wanted to mess with. Nobody wanted to hang around with. And that's not the case for them right now. And they're creative, and there's an energy to them. This team could go 41-41, right? Like it could be the most middies 500 team you've ever seen in your life. But this is a team that has good vibes, that people are interested in, that people like. And I don't necessarily think that that's something that you should scoff at. I don't think that that's something that, we should take lightly. Because think about how fast this roster transformation has been. 2 years and a pandemic. And just like that, this is something you see in football. A quick roster transformation, a quick philosophy transformation. Give credit to the Reinsdorfs, whether it's Michael or Jerry, for letting Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas doing what they got to do and what they think is right. It doesn't mean they win at number 7. I don't know. But it's working. It's different. It's a philosophy change. You're trying to adapt. You're not doing the same thing over and over again. And thinking you're going to have different results. The definition of insanity. Now it's something different, and people aren't laughing at you because Garv Foreman and John Paxson are the ones at the helm. You're not doing what this team did for nearly a decade. Because getting lucky and getting Derrick Rose, it was not a philosophy. There's a philosophy going on here. Getting ready-made NBA players that have good relationships among the league, having good relationships among the league and with other front offices, and trying to be there when opportunity knocks at your door. What have I always said about luck, whether it's your career, my career, anyone's career, or in a professional sport or a professional athletic setting? Luck is opportunity meeting preparation. That may be the most cliche thing ever, but it is the most true thing ever. Luck is when somebody comes to you with an opportunity and you're ready for it. We need you to do this. I've been waiting for it. That's all that is. And that was the case where for Lauri, he had that opportunity many times. Times where he shined, sometimes where it was frustrating, didn't pan out. So we'll see now what he can do in Cleveland, where he's going to get a bulk of the playing time. We'll see now what the Bulls do with a new roster, where Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas have had a time to scout and self-scout, and we saw what they thought of their roster. And now we'll see what happens with Zach LaVine heading into a huge contract year. We're seeing that where he's going to go for his agency. Not for 100, Rich Hill maybe, I believe who it was. But regardless, we know that he's going to try to go make his money. So this is it. There's a lot going on for this Bulls team. And again, follow the money. Follow what they're telling you. What are they telling you? They're putting self-pressure on themselves. I don't know if it's pressure to think they're going to an NBA championship, but they put pressure on themselves to say, we believe in this roster, the roster we're putting together. We think we're going to be contenders. We think we could be in the thick of things. Whether that means they believe as far as winning number 7 or we're going to be competitive, we're going to put ourselves in the right position, we'll have to wait and see. But I think for the most part, after this trade, and I think for most Bulls fans, as much fun as they've had this summer, there were still questions, and there's still questions, but you got to be excited that in Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas are making moves, being creative, and are not afraid to go for a risk. Because here's the thing, a risk is what gets you a Joker, a Michael Porter. That's the big thing that this Bulls team needs to start doing. Because you can't just rest and hope that you're going to get the number one pick. It's an interesting new day for Chicago, but let me know your thoughts. Lauri Markkanen is now a Cleveland Cavalier. Larry Nance, a Portland Trailblazer. The Chicago Bulls get Derrick Jones Jr. to slam dunk all over the United Center. And some draft picks. Look at that. The Bulls addressed some needs and concerns, some willful ones, but nonetheless, they addressed them. So a wonderful trade, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts all over the universe. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media, Instagram, Mike Mercado Media, and of course, be interactive with the show on Twitter at Couch Sports Talk. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this edition of Sports from the Couch. Make sure you like, rate, review, and share us wherever you get your favorite podcast at Mercado Airwaves. We're on all major podcast platforms. Check out the YouTube channel, guys. See the video version of the podcast at youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. And we're on Roku. Shout out to Jerry Riles at The Rewind Sports 60. We are on Facebook. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Become a producer of the network over at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. We have swag, teespring.com/Mercado Airwaves. Check out our Twitch channel, guys. We do marathons. We upload episodes. Twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves. And of course, keep up to date every single time we upload a brand new episode on the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the Good Brothers, the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast, the Gone Missing podcast, Murder Mysteries and More, Sports from the Couch, and all our interviews with athletes and celebrities. And you guys know the rest, Mercado Airwaves. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your weekend. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Enjoy all the games. We will see you next time here on Sports from the Couch on the Mercado Airwaves Network. I'm Mike Mercado.